the slides, let me first of all just say how pleased I am to be here in light of the predecessors of mine on this list. The Americans, some of whom are among my closest friends, people I've known, and just looking at this list, my gosh, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them I've known for more than 50 years at this point, which is just amazing. And some, not Americans, like Mike Baker, only 30 years, okay? And Danny Blanchflower probably only for 35 years or so. So these are people, all of whom I won't say I've grown up with, I've grown old with, I think is a better way of saying it. I also have grown old. It reminds me of a birthday card my younger sister sent me once, which said, "We're both getting old, Dan, but you're getting older than I am." So I've grown older, I am, than Morley, but I've known him for at least, I think, since 1985 or 6. Although I was familiar with his work beforehand. I've probably told this story to some of you before, but we got to know each other because Morley called me up, this is pre-email, and said, "I'd like you to be a co-author of mine on a paper I'm writing." I said, "What are you talking about? All you got to do is give the paper, Dan." I said, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'm happy to write a paper with you, but I'm not going to just give a paper that you write." So we did write a paper together. And in fact, I did give the lecture based upon that paper, which leads me, if I can get this to work here. No, going backwards, let's go the other way. There we go. So I was told that I was doing the Morley Gunderson Lecture. I mentioned it to a somewhat Canadian economist. She said, "How can you name a lecture for a guy who won't lecture?" And so this is the Morley Gunderson Lecture. Question. It is amazing that I'm giving the Morley Gunderson Lecture. Paper, it's called, the lecture is Time Working and Not Working. And it's basically about everything about how we use time. It was based originally on the book of mine that Professor Chin mentioned that came out in 2019, but this has been updated. And because of this, I have, to use the term somebody used to me this afternoon, he was Canadianizing American textbook. I have Canadianized this to the greatest extent I could without writing whole original papers on this. So there's a bunch of Canadian stuff in here. There's more American stuff simply because I did not have the time, or in some cases, there weren't the appropriate data to answer the question I wanted to do, okay? But there's a lot of Canadian stuff here. I want to think about time. I mean, I don't know, I'm hung up on time. I have been since I was a little kid, but I think there's a reason to be hung up on it. Let's go back here, darn it. There we go. Ugh. There we go. It's the lag you got to get used to. Anyway, the question is, do we have more money or more time than our grandparents? I have this here from 60 through 23, real up to date on Canada and the US. And the slashed bars are number of years of life expectancy on average in the country. And the solid bars are income per capita adjusted for inflation, okay? And what you'll notice very clearly is that those solid bars are going up an awful lot more rapidly than the slashed bars, right? I mean, income is rising, real income is rising much more rapidly than life expectancy. If you think about that, two things in life, income and time. Income is becoming relatively less scarce, and time is becoming relatively more scarce. Okay? I gave an honors lecture to graduates 12, 14 years ago. I talked about how, make the most of time. That's what's really scarce. 24-year-olds don't understand this at all, but it is increasingly true that time is relatively scarce. And one little thing to note to make you proud to be Canadian, notice I don't have a thing here, this doesn't work, that the life expectancy in the US and Canada was almost the same in 60. Now the Canadian vertical bar is about 3 years above, at least 3 years above the American vertical bar, which I find terribly depressing as an American. On the other hand, we've really increased our real incomes. That's what we've apparently been very good at. I'm not sure which is better in some value sense, but an amazing difference in fact. But it's certainly the case that over time, money has become relatively less scarce, time has become relatively more scarce. Okay? I refer to when some assignment of mine gets canceled, I say, I've gotten a time gift. And this is wonderful. I mean, unexpected gift of time. What do you do with it? I mean, I typically just lie around thinking, but other people can use it better than me. Okay, time is what is scarce. It's increasingly scarce, but also true within a country. Think about a rich person and a poor person. The poor person has relatively lots of time, but not much money. The rich person has lots of money, but not much time. And this relative scarcity should affect their behavior. And I'll show you a bunch more points about how that plays out in our lives. If I were to do middle income countries the way I did for the US and Canada, it would even look more stark. In other words, income has grown even more rapidly there than life expectancy, which has grown, by the way, much more than in North America, but nowhere near as fast as it has in these countries. Okay? All right. So how do we figure out how to make some solid, serious statements about that? We need data. I'm a tremendous data grubber. I mean, I run regressions. I've been running regressions since 1963. It's the thing that makes me happiest in life. And there's no question about it. But I need data. And the problem is with time, how do we classify it? And there's been an almost agreed upon four-way classification. It goes back to an economist named Margaret Reed, who probably 3 or 4 of you have heard of, who never had a tenured job at Chicago, but she was at Chicago forever. And this is her idea from a book in the early 1930s. So we get data on time. How do we get the data? People are asked, random samples of people are asked, sit down this morning and make a note of what you were doing at every minute of the previous day, called a time diary. Okay? And it's not done simultaneously with the activities, but it is done the next day. These have been done now since the 19-teens, believe it or not. Okay, a small sample in Philadelphia. The US has been doing this every month for 1,000 people since 2003. We were sort of slow to get in the bandwagon. Other countries, Canada does this every 5 years as part of the General Social Survey, which are pretty good data, but not the greatest. And most of the European countries have these in somewhat homogenized form, off and on over the past 3 or 4 decades. They were very big in the communist world in the 50s and 60s. Communists were terribly interested in this. There's a bunch of these in places like Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, former Czechoslovakia, et cetera, small studies. These have gotten bigger, and the US, they are now done regularly with lots of people, now about 250,000 people over the years. If you want to classify the activities that people code, in the US data, there are 400 different activities that can be coded. Other countries, I think the Canadian one, I don't know, I used it, it was nowhere near as much, but there was a lot. So how are we going to classify it in some useful way? Knowing whether you do something out of 400 categories doesn't help me very much. So how are we going to classify it? Category number 1 is paid work. So job, pay. If I'm working on the job, even sitting in my office, if I were being paid, writing papers, that counts. Or a student, time in class, I would count. Homework, time spent looking for a job. All these things contribute to my livelihood. But even here is the problem. I spend, I think, 20 hours a week doing work that I'm not paid. And I'm never going to get paid for this. Should I count that as work or not? I don't know. It's an accounting problem. My view is as long as we're consistent across people and over time, I don't care how you classify things, as long as it's consistent. It's a standard accounting problem. Next, home production. Things that you do, but you could contract out and have somebody do it for you. Childcare, you can pay somebody to take care of your kid, you probably do. Cleaning the house, we do that. We also clean, but we pay people every few weeks. Walking the dog, believe me, you live in Manhattan around Central Park. There are a lot of people making money walking dogs. mean, it looks like something out of Cerberus. There are 3 or 4 dogs on a leash. It's sort of disgusting. Things you could pay somebody to do for you is what is home production. You do them. Why do you do them? You enjoy it. It's cheaper, maybe. It may produce a better product. I mean, you might enjoy reading to your kid. You might read Where the Wild Things Are better than somebody else does, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Next, required personal activities. Things we all do as part of being a human being. We don't have to wash up. I mean, you could go unbathed forever. You don't have to have sex. You probably do need to sleep, at least a little bit. I mean, in these diaries, except for like 0.1% of people on a typical day, they're sleeping, okay? These are things that you can't pay somebody to do for you. And I'll make the standard line, with you, yes, on some of them. But for you, no. You got to do it yourself, okay? Here's an example of the silliness of this, okay? My husband and I make love 6 times a week. We've outsourced our sex life to a young couple overseas. This makes no sense. You can't do that. You can't outsource it, okay? But, and the same thing for sleeping. Nobody can sleep for you, et cetera, et cetera. You might have somebody wash you, but you still got to stand there being washed, right? Leisure. Everything else is leisure. Things that in order to enjoy it, you got to do it yourself. The sex and stuff you might not enjoy, sleeping enough. These you got to enjoy. Television watching, exercising, is that enjoyable? I even think, is it even not work? I mean, I run long distance and I get the best ideas I ever get when I'm running. I still classify this as leisure, but it also feeds into the other. I'm just illustrating the difficulty of thinking about these categories. Sporting events, going to religious activities. If I say a prayer for my parents on their anniversary of their death, I do that. It's a religious activity. Do I enjoy it? Not really, as depressing as can be. I have to do it though. Actually, even that I could contract out. There are people who do this for you, but I want to do it myself. This Saturday, I made a promise not to bring in too much stuff about the current issues in the United States. But this Saturday, I'm going to one of the countless demonstrations around the country against T-Rump and Muskrat, those people who are trying to make America into an autocracy. And how should I classify that? Paid work? Nah. Home production? Certainly not. Personal activities? No. Leisure, yes, but I'm not enjoying it. It's very depressing. How about I give blood regularly? How should I classify a time spent lying there with this giant needle in my arm? That's leisure also. Is it pleasure? Well, no, but I got to do it myself. Okay? And to illustrate the absurdity of some of these ideas, this is cartoon. That's the guy I hired to read Proust for me. Okay, I mean, he can't say he's read Proust if somebody reads it for him. If you want to say I've read the entire Remembrance of Things Past, which is a lousy title, by the way, it's not the real title, you got to read it yourself. Sit through all 4,000 pages. But these are the categories we'll use. And anything you mention, how you spend time, I will be able to categorize it in a way which I think makes sense. Now, question, which I'm not going to get into at all, is what if I double time? I do 2 things at once. My wife, for example, would cook and watch television, MSNBC, needless to say. Is that leisure or is it home production? Well, whatever you say, dear. I mean, as long as she classifies it in a reasonable way and people do the same thing over time, then there's no problem at all. But these are, I stress, like any accounting category, rather arbitrary. All I can ask for is consistency over time. Okay, so let's look at these activities and compare them across countries. Here we have Canada from the most recent data I can get on the far right. Personal activities, solid black, leisure, striped upper left, right, lower left, dotted home production, and then paid work, the opposite thing. And you'll notice a few things about this. First of all, the heights are pretty similar across countries, right? Personal activities is the biggest by far. Why is that? We all sleep. by far the most common thing people do. Next biggest in most countries is leisure of various kinds. So there's more variation in that. Then home production, you'll notice that the US is quite low in home production. UK higher, Canada is low. And lastly, paid work. And you'll notice which is the highest there in paid work. And we'll talk more about this. The US, some of which behavior is spilled over to Canada, but Canada is not quite as high as paid work, okay? But they're pretty much similar across countries. The ranking is typically personal, leisure, paid work. This is for the average adult, by the way. And then last of all, home production. I think that's the way it goes. And I've done this for a bunch of countries. It's all pretty much the same. I think it's amazing to me, people don't think about work being rather unimportant in our lives, but it really is not very big, about 14% for the average person. Obviously it varies and we'll talk about that. Okay, I talked about scarcity. Who's stressed about time? If I were to ask you a question, on a scale of 4 to 1, 4 being most stressed, 1 being no stress at all, about time, feeling rushed for time, what would you answer? 4. 4 is the highest, yeah. Wait, let me tell you this, okay? I think people in our business like to say how stressed they are. It's a sign that I'm really important and therefore I'm very stressed. They won. No, you gave it away already. I'm sorry. Okay. Anyway, the question is it really the case that the relative scarcity of time causes people to express more time stressedness? So what I've done here is we've taken for 3 countries, all I could get it for, by categories of earnings, okay? The black is the highest earning category. No, the black is the highest earnings category. The black is 100 stressed. Take people who are very stressed and look at their earnings. Let that be 100 for those who are most stressed, okay? The earnings of those who say they're somewhat stressed is not as high. It's about 90% of the earnings of those who are very stressed. Of those who are rarely stressed, they're only 75% earnings of those in the highest category. And those who are never stressed, it looks even less. Their earnings are even less. That was true to a greater extent in the US than elsewhere, Australia less, Germany less. And I think the reason is because people in the US, we have a higher gradient of work time with earnings than they do in Australia or Germany. Certainly in Australia, that's true. There's no question those for whom time is relatively scarce, who make a lot of money, do express more stress for time. So obviously, sir, you're 5, you're making a whole bundle of money. Good for you. No. Okay, I think this is really neat. Even if you don't work, if your income is higher, you're more stressed for time. The reason is very simple. It takes time to spend money. And if I have lots of money, I'm running around finding things to do. My favorite example of this was my wife overheard we lived in a town with some incredibly wealthy people, Austin, Texas, and some of whom we're moderately acquainted with. One of whom my wife was sitting around and heard women say, "I've gotten permanent eyeliner." You know what this is? They're sort of tattoos, right? Up here. She said, this way I don't have to put on eyeliner every morning. I have more time for my other activities. Okay. This is a woman who had no labor market activity. Her husband was very, very, very high earner, but her time was valuable. She was stressed for time. And this is one way to save her a little bit of time. Okay. Even for kids. I mean, these days, little kids maybe less so, but certainly teenagers running around from the soccer to the cello to this, that, and the other thing. There's lots to do. And their parents have the money to put them in lots of things. Okay, what is stressful among these activities that I talked about? So this is the question, what if you worked 1 hour less? okay? What would that do to the time stress? And again, I have data on France, the UK, and Germany. I couldn't get this for Canada or the US. So let's look at it here. What would you do with the hour that would make you less stressed if you worked less? Work is very stressful, by the way, in case you hadn't noticed. Well, you would do a bit more home production. That would help you feel less stress. You would sleep a lot more. Okay, look, that's the sleep is the biggest by far. See that there? That's a real biggie up there. In all the countries, TV watching is almost as big as sleep in the US. It's bigger in France. In the UK, it's about the same. In Germany, it's about a little bit more. But mainly, you would be less stressed if you could shift an hour of work to something else. Not other leisure, mostly sleep and TV watching. Sleep and TV watching are what we do when we have nothing else to do, as you might have noticed. Okay, famous quote. People know the quote? No, he just said it. He never released that. It's completely apocryphal, the whole thing. I researched this and it just, people know it. So what is rich and poor in the US and Canada? And who works more? And how do they spend the time not working? And I couldn't get everything for Canada, but it's enough that people all know this anyway. So we have here the income of the top 1%. What percent of total income in Canada goes to those in the top 1%? And you'll notice now it's about 12%. That share has doubled since '79, which I didn't realize the change was that large. The bottom 50% have gone from about 22% down to about 17%. Okay. I didn't expect that, okay? The US, it's even a greater change over time, but it's still quite substantial here. I don't know the history in between these times, that you guys know it better than I do, but there's no question income inequality has risen in Canada also. Okay. This is for the US. I could have, if I really wanted to spend a lot of time, gotten this for Canada. I'm sure Morley has this off the top of his head about how this varies by education level. But this is 79 being the solid line, being the dots here, and the solid line going up there shows what it is in 2020 as a function of education level. And you take them, assume it is equal arbitrarily 100 in 1979. At both of them, what's happened over time as education goes up is the returns to education have widened. I assume that's true in Canada also, right? I would assume so. Not as much, however, in the US. US, much higher return to education, because education is more heterogeneous in the US, maybe. Okay. So the rich are different. How much different are they? This compares the difference to the top 5% of people. I couldn't do it for Canada. They didn't have income in the time data, damn it. But they had it, but they had 8 categories, which is close to useless. The top 5% compared to everybody else. Well, the top 5% in US are working 8 hours more a week. That's a lot. On a 38-hour a week or 40-hour a week, that's a lot. But that's US. In France, it was even more so among those who work at all. They're doing less home production in France, about the same in the US as the top 5%. The people in the top 5% sleep about 3 hours a week less. Remember, the hours have to add up, right? It's 100, no matter whether you're rich or poor, you got 168 hours a week. And they aren't making more hours either. We'll talk about that though in a little bit. Other personal time, the French do spend a little bit more if they're not well off, okay? The big difference, of course, is TV watching. Okay? Americans in the top 5% watch about 1 hour less a day than the rest of the people. Now, is that a lot or a little? That's a huge amount. The average American watches 3 hours a day. which is shocking, right? Well, we're the champions of watching television, okay? Compared to any other rich country, we do more of it. But the French, higher income people watch even less television relative to the rest of the people. Other leisure, very little difference. The main difference is that work is much higher among the people on the top of the income distribution, and TV watching is much lower. Okay. And America really is the champion. And American men are the champions among Americans of watching television. Okay, who does more paid work, men or women? These are Canadian data, I'm proud to say. I got these for a number of years for the last 50 years. Highly up to date. I hope you're impressed. Okay, 2024. And you'll see that, as you know, men do more work in the market than women. This is, everybody sitting in this room knows that. And the rate at which men are working, participation rate, whether you work at all, has been going down for men for the last 50 years. And for women, it went up and then it leveled off. And the same thing is true in the US. I remember been talking about this in public about participation for 50 years, and it rose like crazy in the US, the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I said, oh my gosh, by 2020, it's going to be really high. And then it stopped growing entirely. And you can see essentially the same thing here in Canada too. A little bit of a growth from 98, but essentially none. Okay? But no question, more paid work by men than by women. However, there's work and there's work. Work at home is certainly work. And indeed, I was on a national committee about 20 years ago now, where people wanted to change the national income accounts to include work at home. This is a common thing among women's groups, right? People know that. I'm not sure how you value it. This was wonderful debates with leading feminist economists and a couple of other people about this. But let's at least count the hours. And what this looks at is, for those who remember introductory macro, this is a 45-degree line. It's a line of complete equality between men's total work, that's paid market work and homework, and women's total work. And you'll notice that a large number of these countries lie along the line. Indeed, I noticed this preparing for this, Canada is not just near the line, it is right on the line here in an older study, but it's right there. The US is a little bit below, and some countries are higher up, typically less developed countries, where the women do much more homework plus market work than men. And also all those red countries, which I thought was a wonderful anomaly. What do those 4 red countries have in common? If you can figure out the abbreviation. E is Spain, thank you very much. F, France. E, Ireland. I, Italy. What's they have in common? They're all heavily Catholic countries, that's right. And apparently in those countries, women do more. Italy is amazing. I mean, that's way the hell up there. And I know everybody has a picture of some old lady in a black outfit scrubbing the floors, okay? Which is not, or cooking, cooking. In fact, it's independent of age, and it's independent of where they live in Italy. Italian women just do more. So if you're a young guy looking for a wife, bring her over from Italy, because she'll work really hard in the house, okay? But in rich northern countries, it's about the same. There's no difference. This, most people find terribly surprising. But I mean, the facts are there. I didn't make this up. I did a survey among undergrad students in my econ class, econ professors of labor economics, and sociologists. Who got this most right? Sociologists, undergrads, or economists? Come on, what should it be? The economists did, of course. But the undergrads got it more right than the sociologists did, which I thought was hilarious, in fact. Anyway, there's no question, in terms of total work, there's very little difference. Now, you may say one work is valued more by society. It's a different question. I ain't going to get into that. Okay, togetherness. What does it mean to be together with a partner or spouse or kids? So my wife is in her office writing something, and I'm in my office reading a book. Are we together? We're not interacting. We're doing in the same location, but we're doing different activities. Indeed, I have a cartoon which I don't use, which shows a family of four sitting in front of a television. The guy's watching a football game. The woman is something on the computer. One kid is on her phone. Another one is playing with an iPod, but iPad, whatever you call it. I don't have them, okay? I don't do except for this. So are they together or not? What is together? Well, in the data, you can do this for France, actually. I couldn't get anywhere else. And if you take total activities, the number of hours that they're actually in the same place doing the same activity is this one over here, about 1 hour a day. And for most of us, it's eating a meal with a spouse or with a kid. But the TV watching, not very often, reading a book, playing sports, exercising, very, very rare to be together with somebody, really together. I'd love to do this over time if I had the data to see if people are getting less together. I mean, it goes to Bob Putnam's old bowling alone stuff, which we all know. I'd love to see some real data on that. I haven't. Okay, this gets increasingly important to me over time. And these are Canadian data for 2015. Okay. What happens to the time people spend in these major different things? Sleep and other personal, paid work, home production, TV watching, other leisure. Okay. By age category. Okay. And you can see hours per week, even at 55, 59, it's not what you think it is, but we're talking about the average week. And some weeks you're on vacation, some are paid holidays, and we'll talk more about that later, okay? By age 70, the slash line over here, the middle one, it's down to about 5 hours a week for the average Canadian. By age 80 plus, it's almost nothing. And there's so few working at all for pay. So what are they doing as you get older with your time, 80 plus? Okay. Well, what are you doing? You're watching TV, a lot more TV watching. You can see the middle one, that one over there. TV is up by a huge amount. Good grief, how much is that here? That's about 10 hours more a week, another hour and a half a day of TV watching. Okay. Sleeping is up, but not quite so much, about 10 hours a week. Home production, you would think that you would substitute from paid work to work at home, but you don't, perhaps because it's more difficult to do if you're older, or perhaps because you have enough money and you hate it, you now contract out. So I contract out, we have the cleaning people every 3 weeks. We do takeout. New York is the home of takeout. And so we don't have to cook as much. Or you bring in a pizza if you're 20 something, okay? Do that. What else do we do? TV watching, other leisure goes up also, but nowhere near as much. In our case, we don't work as much. We don't work at all for pay. We go out to the theater or the concert, okay? So people spend all 168 hours, but as they get older, they're shifting away from paid work towards sleep, toward TV, and toward other leisure things. This is how we spend our time as we age. Okay, question. Some of you know US real well. If I were to do the same graph for the US, how would it look? I had the same graph, I decided to put Canada in here instead. Okay. Any guesses? It looks identical. Yeah, what? More people working later in life. So the thing basically is this graph move over starting at 60 to 64. If I were to label the black one, 60 to 64 for the US, be pretty much on the money. If I do it for Europe, which I've done, it looks very much like this, except maybe even a little lower at 55 to 59. Okay. So clearly the age pattern looks the same, but just shifted a little bit along the axes. I think is quite neat. Anyway, sorry, I have to mention Mick. Oh, darn it. Why am I having trouble? I know why, just a second. This is very high tech, this thing is, damn it. There we go. Mick Jagger has this line, which I just love. Okay, what a drag it is going old. People, I assume everybody knows the song. Okay, anyway, health, disability, and time use. This is more Canadian data, which I just did this, and it's included in the paper that I'm in the process of revising. An interesting issue. What if if you have a disability? You're not allowed, at least until Trump took over again, to use the word disabled. You have to say, have a disability. Okay? I don't know if you all know that. Okay. Anyway, what if you have a disability? How does it affect how you function? And what we looked at was how many different things you do in a day. Looking at old people, which is relevant because the most disabilities are for older people. The incidence of disability among youth or even people in their 40s is really low, below 5%. But in the US and in Canada, you get up to mid-60s, you're talking 25% of people will say they have a disability, but maybe they're just not really disabled. You look at a country which actually certifies disabilities, Poland, which is one of the other papers, one of the other countries in this study, and it's also about 25%. You get older, you become disabled. I got onto this because my wife became disabled temporarily. And I started thinking about it and watched how we behaved. And I realized we were doing fewer things because it was a hassle to switch from one thing to the other, and some things she just couldn't do anymore. She's now no longer disabled, I tell her. I don't think she is. And so the question is, you'd expect, if we have a bunch of different possibilities, okay, that people with a disability would do fewer things. Make sense? And in fact, the average person, women do more things than men, because women do more things around the house. This is universally true. The person with a disability does either 2 or 5% fewer things in Canada. A person in very good health does more things. A person in fair health does fewer things more, but still more than a person in bad health. So health and disability independently affect how you spend time. Bad health, disability, both lead to less variety in what you do. Which leads me to ask a question, is this useful? Could I make money off it? Sorry about that. And the answer is, think about some plaintiff lawyer looking to sue somebody who trips and falls and what the cost of them is. Well, it's not just if you're not working, there's no lost wages, but you have a lot of lost enjoyment because you don't have as much variety in the time you spend. This is my next way of making a few bucks, maybe, probably not. But at least it's a really interesting point because variety is something which in economics term we say is income superior. Rich people do more different things. You know, I have a bunch of evidence on that. Anyway, disability and health affect how we spend time also. Are immigrants lazy? This is tough stuff, right? I would love to have Canadian data. I looked around, I chased after it. I couldn't find any time use where we have any information, not on immigrants, that's easy to do, but on second generation. In the US, I can get first generation, second generation. I want to see if immigrants are different and if their kids become assimilated and behave like natives. So here we have these 6 categories again: paid work, home production, sleep, other personal, TV watching, other leisure. And the black thing is immigrants compared to natives. Okay? And it looks the same in Canada, by the way. And the immigrants do more paid work, everything else the same, adjusting for other demographics, than the natives do. Okay? They sleep more. Okay? They watch much less television and enjoy much less other leisure. Okay? Now, maybe it varies by enclave. It may be different if Hispanic immigrants can watch Univision or something like that. But the average immigrant in the US is watching much less television, engaging in 2 hours a week of less leisure, but working about an hour and a half more. Okay? So all the myth about lazy immigrants, that's just rubbish. Okay? It's absolutely wrong, disgustingly wrong. The question is, what happens to their kids? And I think this is universal. I look at my own family. My grandparents were immigrants. My parents were the second generation. And they become like natives. This is second generation minus immigrants. The immigrants had worked more than natives, but second generation works less than immigrants. If you add those 2 bars together, you get 0. In other words, the second generation's working exactly as much as the natives work, which that's just wonderful. I think assimilation is glorious, but that's home production. They're back to almost zero. Sleep, you add those two together, goes to zero. Okay. Other leisure goes to zero. Other personal goes to zero. TV watching doesn't disappear. Okay. But basically, the immigrants' children become like the natives on the biggest of these categories: paid work, sleep, not on TV watching. I think that's remarkable, and to me, very gratifying. You may not find it so gratifying. I don't know. Okay, so I don't think immigrants are lazy. So have we gotten more time, which obviously is quite scarce? Well, let's think about it. Life expectancy, I showed you that at the start. Over 60 years, we've gotten maybe an extra 7, 8 years. And whether we'll get any more of that, a lot of people think that's not going to go up as fast as it has during my lifetime. I hope they're wrong. There's a wonderful paper on the L-shaped life expectancy. In other words, the chance of living to 80 is going up like crazy, but after age 80, it's not going up that much. And maybe if that's true, then there's not as much opportunity for further increase. So I don't think we're going to get more life expectancy. Work hasn't changed much at all, okay? And there's not too many ways, despite Keynes's famous comment I'll talk about, of doing that. Home production, has that gotten easier to do? Most of the people in the room are too young to know this. How many of you grew up with a semi-automatic washing machine? Did you? No, you didn't. You're much too young. A wringer, yeah, by hand. There was no, the thing that flings them around. You took it out of the wash, and then put it through the wringer, and then we hung it out on the line outside the house, okay? That was the late 40s, early 50s till we got a fully automatic washer, okay? That's an improvement in time. That's a time-saving device. Microwave? Oh, for sure. Tremendous saving of time. Kettles, good kettles that would heat up the water for tea? Yeah, that's where there has been a substantial saving, and perhaps as much as 3 hours a day freed up from cooking, cleaning. Cleaning? What did we have? Gosh, before we had an Electrolux when I was like 7 or 8. It was it was a carpet sweeper. That's the term. We had a carpet sweeper. The new ones are better, and even recent changes, the Dyson stuff, they're much better than the old Electrolux we have. These increase quality, and they also reduce time spent. Okay, that's at hope. How about personal time, which is the biggest use of time? Sleeping? I've seen no way of technical improving my sleep. I mean, I take a drug maybe to help me sleep better, but the time I spend sleeping, I don't think so. Sex? Anybody know the movie Sleeper by Woody Allen? Remember the orgasmatron? That's the technical improvement in sex, okay? But it may not improve the quality. Okay? But this is also not quite fictional. Okay? Leisure? Well, I mean, leisure is tremendously more enjoyable now. I mean, you go to a museum. I used to go to the one in Chicago, Museum of Science and Industry as a kid. And they have these wonderful, fancy displays that do all kinds of things. They improve the quality, but they don't save your time doing it. So I see very few quality. Look at the TV. My first TV, we got it in 1950 to watch the World Series. It was 12 inches black and white, 12 inches this way, by the way. And now we're way behind the times. We have only a 50-inch, 7-year-old flat screen TV, which is already way the heck behind the time, right? But it's a tremendous improvement about what we had. It enhances our enjoyment. It doesn't save us time. Okay. So what if we had an increase in time? Keynes talked about in an article, an essay in 1930, it was Economic Prospects for Our Grandchildren. What's going to happen when machines work so well that the average person will work 15 hours a week? Well, he's only 5 years from the centenary of that, and he sure hasn't been right so far. So I would say stick to the macro system, Maynard. Don't worry about predictions. Okay? But we have had chances to look at what people do if they do get more time. not what they would do, but what they actually do. And it turns out Japan and Korea both lowered the hours at which overtime pay must be paid. Okay. In other words, they put a tax on extra hours, and not surprisingly, it reduced the hours of work. We have theories about that and a lot of empirical work by some people in this room. So what do people do in those countries if they get more time? Well, there's Japan. Here's paid work that go down, okay? It went down more for men than for women in both Japan and Korea. The reason being very few women were working long enough to hit the hours constraint beforehand. Not surprising at all, okay? Home production actually went down for women, and for men went up a little bit. So maybe if the guys didn't work for paid much, you think they might help out more in the house. They don't there. Personal care, well, that's a big increase for both of them. In Korea, huge increase in personal care. And Korean men, by the way, are the champions of personal care among men worldwide. They spend a lot of time grooming. But the time saving over there, much went to that. In Japan, it went up. It was basically an increase in TV watching. So at least in these two countries, which had savings of a couple of hours of time for men, 3-4 hours, the time was used for things that you wouldn't approve of. TV watching and grooming. It was not used for things that Keynes talked about if people had more time, all these wonderful volunteer work they would do, intellectual activities, unless you think TV watching there is an intellectual activity, which I sincerely doubt, okay? So I'm not too sanguine about, even if we worked a lot less, what wondrously good things we would do. We would sleep more, we'd watch more TV, and that's about it. You may disagree, but this is the only evidence I've been able to find of it, okay? Also the case, what if we're forced to work less because of a severe recession, as we have in 2008, 9, and 10? And in studies of this, I redid it. About 2 hours less work for the average American worker at that time, which is a big drop, right? And what did they do with it? Mostly they slept more. Okay. The average person slept a bit, enough more to offset exactly that decline. So I think people will enjoy themselves, take better care of themselves. Their hair would be better if they had any, but they would not be doing more worthwhile things, okay? The question is, do we want to work less? Well, clearly I showed you that work is the most stressful thing we do, and no question about it. It's also the case, if you look at the happiness of people in Japan and Korea, who were the ones most affected by this cut in hours, those who had their hours cut and did more things like sleeping, grooming, blah, 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 their happiness went up the most, okay? You may not like what they did, they may have moral judgment on it, but they were just a lot happier, which isn't so bad. Okay, I love this graph, okay? It shows and I haven't updated it to 23 yet, but it's not going to be much different. For these periods, basically 2 20 years apart periods, in a bunch of countries, hours worked per employee. And if you look at it carefully, there's Canada. It's been falling. Hours worked per employee, okay? Been falling. Australia fell. France really fell in the last 2 decades of the 20th century. Germany, I couldn't get it for 79 because the country that was pre-unification, but it's really low, France and Germany. Japan, this is amazing. We think of Japan as the hardest working country. It ain't anymore. It was, look at that blue line there above 2000. Now, less than Canada, less than Australia, and much less than the world champions of work, the United States of America. If you look at the last one, it has barely fallen in the US, and it's now higher than any of these other countries. And I could put Spain in here or Italy. It wouldn't put Netherlands in there. We have Netherlands. They really don't work much. Sweden, Denmark, Finland, they'd all be lower. Now, among rich countries, the US now, the average person works harder. And yet, in all these countries, the average work week is 35 or 37 hours. So how can we in America be working? And Canada is almost as bad. Look at that. You're now second highest or third highest next to Australia. How can this be? If everybody is working on, the average person is working 35 to 37 hours a week. What's causing this difference in the US? What? Lack of vacations, exactly right. We have, look, it's pathetic. Okay? Most countries mandate 4 weeks of vacation. I don't know what you do here, but I think you do some kind of mandate, right? 3, okay. And people do it. We have no mandated vacation in the US. Some companies will give you paid vacation, typically the higher paid things, but you may not take it necessarily. Other countries in Europe, good grief. 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Australia has at least 5 weeks, and it has the wonderful every 10-year sabbatical, which is a truly wondrous thing. It's like we get in academe, 4 months as I remember it was, it used to be 4 months when I studied this, full pay to do whatever you want. That'll give you a few hours less per year on average, that's for sure. Okay? In America, we do nothing like this at all. So it's not surprising, even though our participation rate is about the same as the average rich country, even though the average work week, 35, 37, it's just that we have many more work weeks that we do. It's really bizarre. Why does this happen? Left-wingers will argue it's consumerism. But you know, Germany has as much consumerism as America is. France, they have advertisements everywhere. You can't go to a movie theater without seeing an advertisement. I don't think it's consumerism at all. Just looking at the changes in this across countries. Is it declined in unions? Because unions are much less important. We're like 11% unionized in the US now. But unionism has declined elsewhere at the same time that hours work have gone down. Perhaps not to the same extent, but to some extent, certainly the UK. The answer in the US is the same answer for all of our problems south of the border, political stalemate. The one thing you can say about Trump is there's no stalemate. It's a pure dictatorship. Okay. When we work, this is also a remarkable difference. I couldn't get the Canadian data on this done at all. The time data didn't have when people were working, which is the other paper I'm currently working on. This is the percentage of workers doing night work. In the US, 25% of people do some work between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. And if you do any hours, if you're doing any night work, the average American is doing about 2 hours a night. That's much higher than any of these other countries. UK is the second highest, not surprisingly. But France, Germany, very little night work. Netherlands, very little also. And if you do it, you don't do as much as in the US. So the US is also the champion of night work. Why? There's no legislative protection. Many countries impose a premium. You must pay a premium on night work. We were talking about that earlier. And this wonderful regression some guy just sent me today on what unions do to night premia. He had a regression that actually raises the night premium, which is what I was asking you about yesterday. But if you haven't got unions and you haven't got political will to impose penalties for night work, you see more night work, shockingly enough. What can we do to time stress? I have no good solution. What about COVID? What did that do? There have been a lot of studies on COVID and time use. Going to a conference next week, we must have 5 papers on this, okay? And the evidence suggests, at least in the US, that there was an increase in total work time. When you think about it, you save commuting time, what are you going to do with it? I sure wouldn't work more, but the average person apparently who didn't have to go to work worked more. This is mind-boggling and very disturbing too. I don't know if it's the same elsewhere. I haven't read the other papers other than the US one on this. At least for the US, probably Canada to a lesser extent, something political needs to be done. I've been in the press a number of times arguing for mandated paid vacations. It's only 3 weeks here. 2, that's pathetic. That's all, 9 or 10? A lot of countries have like 15. You think about holidays, I know we in the US, what do we have? New Year's Day, President's Day, which I don't like that because we used to have Lincoln's birthday when I was a kid in Illinois and that got abolished. What else do we have?
We used to have Martin Luther King Day.
No, we have that now. Until this year, we've had that. Thank you. That's a new one. King Day, President's Day, Memorial Day. That's in there. I mentioned that already. He had that. July 4th. Oh, I mentioned Juneteenth. That's these currently what? They are in some places, not all places. But I mean, there's certainly paid holidays and people do take them off. Things are closed, if nothing else. Banks are all closed. That's no joke, man. What else? Labor Day, Thanksgiving Day, maybe the day after, and then Christmas Day. But I mean, I spend a lot of time in Germany, and whenever I go, I look what's going to be the holidays this year. Netherlands the same way. I taught for 7 weeks spring in the Netherlands. One time, out of the 35 working days, I think 5 were paid holidays. Just happened. They have in typical wonderful Dutch way, they have a holiday which they observe every 5 years only, and which they observed, well, they'll be observing on May 5th or 6th or 7th or 8th. It's Befreiungstag, Liberations Day. But they don't want to take too much time off, so just every 5 years. I just love that. I don't know why. It tickles me. Yeah.
Still has a law listed unpaid statutory
Days off. Texas, we had also, you could take off your birthday or Texas Independence Day. I'm sure you're all aware of.
Trump just instituted Liberation Day.
Yeah, I've heard about Liberation Day. Yeah, that ain't gonna last real long. Anyway, it seems to me the problems that I see there in the US and to a lesser extent in Canada are clearly political problems, not economic problems. And you may say, as Trump did in 2016, people should be working more. We got to get our productivity up. I don't think people's goals in life is to work more. I think it's exactly the opposite. Okay, we could require another thing we could do. You must do this here. If the employer schedules you to come into work and then cancels you, like in a retail store, a Starbucks, do you get paid? You've arranged for a babysitter for your kid. You plan to come in? You get paid here for that? Or must you have a week's notice? We have a few, in New York City, under state law, you must be paid if the retail employer cancels you out. And I think Seattle's the same way, but very few other places in the US. And this is one which particularly impinges on lower wage workers. I don't get canceled out of my work. I haven't got a schedule if I had a work job. That's something we could do. It'd make life better. But most important, mandate paid vacations. The European economies all do this, even Japan, Australia. Your 2 weeks is rather pathetic, with all due respect. It's a hell of a lot better. It's infinitely better, in fact, than we have in the US. And to me, the question then becomes, economist questions, what would this do if we mandated vacations and people took time off? How much would GDP per capita go down? That's the economic question. And there's no question there's some cost, unless you think people's work, as some people do think, has no marginal value beyond some lower level. In which case, why are employers so stupid as to keep them there all the time? I do believe it matters, but I do believe in diminishing marginal productivity, so that if we cut work time by, let's say, 5%, I shouldn't think we'd cut output by 5%. The question is, you want more time to yourself. Are you willing to give up a couple of percent of your income? It's a choice, a political choice, not an economic question. Evaluating it's an economic question. Doing it, pure politics. Oh, I've done a lot on that. I've written on it. There's a guy now in Toronto who's been pushing this like crazy. They have one totally fake so-called experiment in England where they got people to sign up for it. And the question is, did they love it afterwards? Well, yeah, they all signed up for it. Shockingly enough, they all liked it afterwards. I've not seen a serious study on this. There's no question, though, that at least in the current market, this was a paper we just published a few months ago, finally, we looked at the premium or the penalty, what you get a little bit less extra per hour if you get a 4-day schedule. If 4-day schedules are desirable, you should be paid a little bit less for working 4 days on a per hour basis, okay? And the answer is people who do get 4 hours scheduled, everything else the same, do get a little bit less per hour, okay? And that has actually, that penalty has gone down a little bit in the last 40 years. That suggests that given the supply of 4-day schedules, more people want them. But employers can't afford to do it. They can't give you the same pay per hour because they're giving something up, namely your productivity, if you work 4 days a week. I would like to, people want also, no question, they want consecutive days of leisure. That's a desirable schedule. People who don't get that are typically less skilled people. It's lousy work, no question. We show that very clearly in that paper. Yeah, no, I thought about I've been on a lot of public things on the 4-day work week. In that one study, but it's not a real experiment. It was a fake, and this guy's publicized this like crazy. People latch onto it. The journalists love this stuff, shockingly enough. But it's not a real study. It wouldn't pass muster by anybody in this room, I hope. Okay, I like the mandated vacations because nobody has said anything much about it, and maybe politically it might go through. Not under the current regime, but maybe someday. And if we care about improving people's lives, how they spend their time, this to me, even if they're going to be sleeping the whole damn time, it's fine by me. Okay, anything else? I think that is it. Question and answer, thank you. Questions from the honoree?
How will AI change all this?
I have no
You
idea.
have autonomous AI, sort of thing, the program itself, agentic AI. We've always said in the past that from Keynes to Jeremy Rifkin, the decline of work and that.
Yeah.
But with AI,
It could really happen, you think, huh?
Really happen.
Yeah, what was the name? Robert, what was the guy's name in the early 60s? The automation revolution, how automation was going to put everybody out of work?
Jeremy Rifkin.
No, this is well before him.
Yeah.
What was the guy's name?
Brave.
No, it was, last name began with a T, and I can't remember, but it was in the 1960. Can't remember his name. Anyway, we're all going to be out of work because of automation. The same response in the US. It's amazing. There were 1 million jobs in 1776. It's amazing with all the technical revolution that more than 1 million people are employed in the US now. I mean, technology can be labor using as well as labor saving. And there's no reason to assume that that isn't labor using as well as labor saving. Different kinds of things, you know this as well as I do, different kinds of things, but in terms of people employed, I don't see that changing very much. Is that too optimistic?
You're a techno-optimist.
I'm a tremendous techno-optimist. Look, but why not be? We've watched this over the last couple of 100 years, and the answer is clearly an optimistic answer. Why should this be any different? And why should COVID have totally changed our thinking about work? It hasn't, by the way. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So it might not change the number of jobs, but it might change the types of jobs and people.
course
So
it
kind of
will.
along those lines of the double timing that you were talking about. People might be able to do jobs that they care about more.
But I agree, and that's the beauty of it. Just as people now can do jobs that are cleaner, less risky, blah, 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 because of technological improvements. Plus our willingness, this is important, to use the new technology to make the jobs better. I mean, look at deaths on the job or injuries on the job plummeted in the US. I'm sure it's the same in Canada too. And it's not just because of OSHA in the US, it's because people want safer work and want more enjoyable work. And we get it. I don't know, I sound awfully optimistic and people say, but most old people are pessimistic about the future. I disagree completely. I wish I'd be around 50 years from now to watch how well things are going, except for the fact that it's going to be having palm trees growing in northern Canada. Except for that problem, things will be good. Other questions, comments? Yeah,
So when you look at those time, yeah, thank you. Those time use, I mean, you still refer to television. You're clearly now broadening it to screen time, correct?
screen time,
Okay.
of course. I mean, I don't watch over the air tele,
Yeah.
I watch streaming series, okay? Yeah, of course.
Can I ask then a follow-up? Last year at this event, we had, Danny Blanchflower, and he'd done work, co-authored work with Jonathan Haidt, who's talked about the smartphone, basically the effects of smartphones as being qualitatively and quantitatively different than television screens. That this is actually, you said you didn't care if people are going to use their time to sleep or watch TV.
Right.
But if watching a mobile phone is diminishing certain things, like in young people, it's leading to according to this research, a collapse in well-being. The old U-shaped happiness is now flattening. It's monotonic. You're actually least happy in your youth, and it's correlated with this time on screens. Would that change your views about giving people more time if it's going to be directed to things that seemingly are causing these negative impacts? It's a lot of ifs. Sorry.
Well, but let's think about it like economists. If it really is causing negative impacts, making people unhappy, I would hope that they aren't suckered enough by Steve Jobs' successors to spend all their time doing this, right?
So the answer is it's addictive. So it's like a nicotine, so it's not really in your willpower, in your ration. Yeah.
Or it's a social thing that all my friends are doing it, okay? My wife says I'm addicted to my cell phone. I spend time on cell phone looking at Facebook, but my time is not valuable. And the question is, will the young people realize, I mean, it isn't. I mean, my wage, my opportunity cost of my time, except for the wonderful things I can spend it on outside of work, is zero as we usually measure it. But kids are eventually, I'm quite convinced, going to learn they can't do this as much as they have. And there's a very nice paper by Kerwin Charles, Eric Hurst on low-educated American males who in their 20s do spend a lot of time gaming, God help us, okay? And one wonders if they'll become disaddicted or unaddicted, or will this increase to the lifetime increase in inequality over the lifetime? That's a serious concern. I don't worry about the average, I worry about the inequality rising still further. Aside from the fact that inequality in life expectancy, which is a time question, in relation to income is phenomenal. Chetty has stuff on this, a study, I mentioned this for France last night when we were talking, how different the longevity is of people in the top 10%, the bottom 10%. I mean, we're talking 10 years in the US. That's huge. France was, I think, 6 years, not surprisingly, because they're a little bit less equal than we are. These are the real concerns. The rest is not triviality in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I had a question about the vacation. When we talk about mandating vacation, I noticed from an HR perspective, people who are given, or the lower income people who are given 2 weeks of vacation is normal when you start out a job. And as you get longer in the job, you get 3, 4, depending on how many weeks you have. I noticed that most of the lower income people, are the people who are getting 2 weeks, prefer to have work through their vacation and take the paid time off. Whereas people in the upper category, they want more vacation.
Yes.
And they take their vacation. So there's a productivity.
I couldn't
issue there.
agree more. Okay, it's been well observed elsewhere. And the reason, let's think about why. The guy with I use the term non-generically, the person with the 2 weeks vacation is getting low pay. And for her or him, the time is less valuable than the extra money, right? Obversely, for the person who's 50, gets the 4 weeks off, makes a real good income, the time is more valuable. So that fits perfectly in with this view of the relative scarcity of the two in relation to income levels. Doesn't surprise me at all. Sorry for bouncing around, but I did this when I was teaching giant classes. I would bounce around when they ask a question, and the kids thought how interested I was in their questions. I didn't give a hoot about their questions. I just couldn't hear them otherwise, given my hearing.
So I remain fascinated by the 4-day work week. But in Canada, one of our smaller universities in Ottawa, St. Paul University, actually did a pilot.
Really?
Yeah, it's a small university in Ottawa. and they did a pilot, and then we were actually just chatting. Their recent collective agreement actually enshrined it in their staff collective
Same
agreement.
weekly hours, but 410 rather than 5/8.
No, not same weekly hours, reduced hours,
And what are they
and
going to do
same
about pay?
and I believe the pay was kept the same.
Okay, I don't see that a private company can do that. Okay. I mean, if your competitors don't do it, unless you think the extra hours that aren't
Mhm.
worked have no value whatsoever.
Right. Yeah.
Or unless you think that over time, that by offering this more attractive contract,
You're
you
gonna
can
have
get
more.
by with a lower pay for the same quality people. In the short run, it might look the same, but in the longer run, unless the time is not productive at all, they should be able to get by with a lower wage,
Yeah.
which may make everybody very happy. Maybe.
Maybe.
Okay. Yeah, one question. Tony had a question, and then this gentleman back there was raising his hand.
Yeah, very insightful lectures as usual. And so most of the study focus on high-income countries. Just wondering, whether there are, some study that have done in, no-income countries and the differences. And we did a study for the 2-day weekend policy impact in China.
I read it and just.
You read, yeah, that's right. There's reduced working time kind of as expected, but and also reduction in household production is kind of surprising, and among other
Without
things.
watching TV or exercising, right?
Yeah, and also the play more video games rather than doing exercise, which is not positive. So,
Not necessarily positive. I would love to do a study on a developing country. I've never done that. I was going to on South Africa, and the prospective co-author died, and so that couldn't be done, but maybe someday. This is why I can't stop working, because there's so many fun things to do, and that'd be a good one too.
Thank you. So staying on this idea of reduced working time, I mean, we're assuming the productivity is linear, right?
No, I wouldn't assume. I assume it's
Yeah, I
quadratic.
think
It does
it's
diminish over
it's
time,
certainly
but it never
curves,
goes negative.
right? So if we look at one extreme, somebody who works 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and their productivity, including marginal productivity, versus somebody who works 1 day a week, 4 hours a day, and how productive they are, just for fun, thinking exercise,
Okay.
looking at extremes. It's not linear. So I guess the hypothesis is that we're already stretched beyond our optimal productivity, even at 5 days a week. So the hypothesis would be that 4 days a week, even 8 hours a day, again, reduced hours, that in each one of those 8-hour days, we're more productive because we have 3 days of leisure in which to recover. The productivity is higher. That's the theory.
Well, product I don't expect, because you're telling me you don't believe the last hour or the last day has any value at all. Average productivity, I expect to rise. Marginal productivity with a margin closer to zero would be higher, okay? But it's going to cost us some output, not the same as the percentage drop in output. And there's evidence on this, very nice time use evidence on this. We looked at hours of work over the day in terms of time spent goofing off. We have measures on goofing off on the job. And in fact, the biggest point, the minimum goofing off is about 6 hours a day.
Mhm.
After 6 hours, people start goofing off a bit more, but they still aren't goofing off full time.
Right.
Okay, but they are wasting a bit more time
Agreed.
socializing at the water cooler.
And so just building on that, I was thinking more about the qualitative aspects as opposed to, balancing them with the quantitative, including vacation. So paid vacation, it's not just a question of whether we get paid and how much paid vacation, it's when. One of the things about the Europeans that they're really smart about is they don't just provide for paid vacation, but it's, during the same time of year in many countries. So in August, for example,
The
half of
vacances,
Europe,
of course, yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
so you don't miss out on, so if I take 2 weeks off in the middle of, I don't know, pick a month, nobody's really.
You're by yourself. Nobody wants to go on a
Well, I have
holiday
make
with
it
you.
up.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
not only, nobody's making up my work.
Yeah.
Work keeps going. So unless it's during the holiday break in the winter when everybody's off, that's high quality time off.
Yep.
A lot of people don't stress about what they've missed. If you take 2 weeks in April or March or February, it's going to be an issue for those of us who actually care about what happens at work. And I think everyone here does.
Well, but even
So-
more
so-
than
so
that, what
it's-
if you want to do something with people? Like I am right now scheduling our 60th anniversary trip with descendants.
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
and it's very hard to find a time when all the descendants don't have to go to work.
So a lot of countries do this better than us, and some
We do it
industries
terribly in
do
North
it
America.
very well. You know, way back in a previous life, I was in the automotive industry. Used to shut down in July.
Yeah,
Ford, Chrysler, GM.
Not
they'd shut
anymore,
down.
do we?
You know, but they do all the maintenance, the changeovers, the lines, and so everybody would be down, people could be together,
Right.
nobody's got fear of missing out, or, you know, even among the management who actually care.
You tell the politicians in Washington to go ahead and do this. Lots of luck, sir. But I agree completely.
Sure.
I've been there often enough, let me tell you. And I worked there, wonderful job for 15 months, fairly early in my post-PhD career. And it was the best job I ever had, and I learned an awful lot. And one of my best friends who was there said, "It's a government by amateurs," which just in light of the way they figured out the tariffs, did you read about that? Unbelievable, just unbelievable. Yeah, go ahead. I promise not to talk too much about it. I've been a pretty good boy, but I've lapsed. I'm sorry. Yeah,
My question's about your findings on sleep.
yeah.
It's a fun question.
Go ahead.
I have a friend, he's a neuroscientist, and he wants to start a sleep coaching business. What are your thoughts on that?
Sleep coaching.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if it's really good, I'd sign up. I'm a terrible, I got off on, I have a paper called the Sleep and the Allocation of Time, one of the more well-known things I've done, showing that high-wage people sleep less, which you think about isn't surprising. They got, and I think there's a headline, great moment, on the front page of the New York Times, "Sleep, why there's no money in it," and which is true. And the question is, high-wage people, high value of time people sleep less. How could they sleep more? But just, yeah, better means more REM sleep, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, I would agree. I think there's a demand for that if it works. I mean, for me, I'd like to see the pudding and the proof in it before I'd sign up for this thing. But yeah, there's clearly a demand. People feel underslept. And that's especially rich people who can afford it. Yeah, Andy.
I think we have one question from online. So what do you think of switching to a 6-day work week with 4 days on, 2 days off?
Okay, I think that's fine. Basically, the problem is we're hung up for religious reasons on the 7-day week, Sunday or Saturday or Friday, depending upon your religion, right? I don't know what the effects would be on people's well-being, leisure, et cetera, or GDP, but the transactions cost of getting from here to there be really tough, whereas a 4-day week is quite doable. Yeah, I had never thought about that. It'd be a hellish thing to try to arrange. If it's even worthwhile doing, which is another question entirely. Good question. It's nice to get questions you've never gotten before. Other questions, thoughts? Timing is a little bit perfect. Anyway, Raphael, thank you, sir.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm very pleased that you managed to start without my presence.
Oh, we were here. You were here in spirit. That's good enough.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
I'm gonna need that controller.
Yes, you
because
are.
We're gonna go back into.
Oh, we gotta do Tony.
To do Tony,
Right.
exactly. So we're gonna, anyway, let's thank.
So we're getting more time now.
We are getting more time. We are getting more time. But I do want to thank Professor Hamermesh for this wonderful talk, the engagement with the Q&As, your questions. And thank you, Professor Chin and Principal Chin for having done the opening. I did want to recognize, and at the very back of our beautiful program, which was designed by our wonderful staff, but actually Andy, to put a name on it. This is a real pleasure to be here every year since 2015, because it really displays the connection that Morley had with the principal institutions at U of T that he contributed to, Department of Economics. Ettore, thank you for always helping us with this presentation and these annual talks, which one year we called the memorial lecture for Morley. He was sitting right in front of us, terrible. Woodsworth College, of course, and of course the center. Tying it back, so the center has, since 1998, given an award in Morley's name. It's for a graduate of our program who's gone on to have a distinguished career, but has also always given back. Since 2015, we've managed to twin the award with the lecture, which is such a nice thing to do. So in keeping with that, and I've now got to not overdo it with this. It's got a lag. We're going to go right to the front, present this year's presentation, hence the time. By the way, there's a whole thing in physics now, and about the whole nature of time. Is it real? Must get in this the reality of time as opposed to some detail in the theories. But there we go. Yeah. So the award, as I said, given to one of our graduates of the program. And this year, Tony, who appears at the very end, and you can read the long bio. It's a short bio, but it has a lot of detail. And Tony's career since even before coming to our program and then after just showcases the amount of work that he's done. I don't know where he squeezed the time. You've obviously shrunk something in that. Not too much TV watching in Tony's career here, unless he's watching on those little screens in the planes between his between his trips. But what's nice is we also give the podium to our annual Morley Gunderson Prize winner. So rather than me detail all of this great stuff you've done, I'd like to invite you, Tony, to say a few words about receiving this award and your time at the center and what this means to you. Podium is yours. There'll be an award. We'll present you after you speak.
Okay, sure. Yeah, what a great honor, and especially after the the lecture, wonderful lecture by Dan, and always admire your work, especially on economic discrimination and also beauty economics. So I haven't done much on that. Maybe I should follow up. So I'm very proud of this, and especially in the front of my mentor, my supervisor, and good friend, Morley Gunderson professor, and also actually 2 classmates coming from my cohort. Sorry, I've been a little bit late because we've been really high in spirit today, and so. Oh yeah, exactly. Steam water as well. So yeah, that's great. And I just want to provide some collaborating evidence on the lazy immigrant arguments, because that's my recent focus of my research. So. We did recently a survey of 800 employers across Atlantic Canada, both before and after COVID, 2019, 2021. Actually, 88 to 89% employers reported very positive experience towards hiring immigrant international students. And number one reason is what? Strong work ethic. Okay, it's probably not surprising. And followed by strong qualification skills and reliability. And so, yeah, so this is something. Also, we use some census data and to prove that actually the first generation immigrants very hardworking but have low earnings, and Morley knows quite well. But second generation catch up very quickly in both in terms of education attainments and also labor market earnings. Much better actually than the first cohort immigrants, but also compared with Canadian-born individuals. They did really well. But third generation, okay, it's like we already know, regression to the mean, just like everybody else, okay? So this is something interesting finding from immigration research. I come here as an international student, later on immigrant to Canada long time ago. I still remember 1989, the end of May, I was about to graduate. I was actually at Tiananmen Square. So at the peak of the democratic moment, I almost got killed. So my parents were scared to death, of course, was more than anxious to send their children overseas. So my brother and sister went to the States in 89 and 91 respectively, and studied computer science and become very successful engineers. And so I came here about 30 years ago, and thanks for the scholarship at Memorial University where I'm teaching right now, and also strong support of another alumni, Professor Andrew Luchek, who hired me as a research assistant and also recommended me to the program, the Center for Doctoral Studies. And so my initial journey to the doctoral study was not actually inspirational because as an international student, couldn't find a job. So, so I did, 10 courses in HR, IR, labor law and so on, because my master's degree in economics, not in IR, HR. And I actually, completed comprehensive exam 2 years later, and I applied for a job again to Stats Canada. I got a job. I consulted with Morley. Morley said, wasn't that particular satisfactory at the beginning, because said, you have full scholarship from U of T. You should be sitting down writing papers. Okay, speaking of use of time. And but it turns out to be a good decision. And eventually, Morley was so understanding and supported my decision. And guess what? I have more than hundreds of different confidential data sets from StatsCan and to do my research and write papers. And so, yeah, and just about time when I graduated, like I have a full-time job between 2001, 2003, and also I have full-time study my dissertation, because there's no part-time PhD program at U of T, so meaning I have to pay the full tuition as well. And so I received an email from my master's program supervisor, Professor Mike Wilhelm. He suggested me, since Tony received the terminal degree, which is PhD, you should probably think about how to re-optimize your future career. So I did. I followed the advice of Mike and went back to academy in 2004. And since then, I have taught in different places at York University in Toronto for 8 years. I got my tenure there, and then move on to actually University of Manitoba. Sorry, I forgot one thing. Our first appointment is at University of Northern British Columbia in Prince George. And then I move on far away to Monash University in Melbourne, Australia, before I returned back in 2015 at Memorial to take the Stephen Jarislowsky Chair in Economic Cultural Transformation. So I think I'm very privileged, to be academic. And I think, thinking back, the investment in education, especially at center, is my best investment. I can still say today, even after so many years of, teaching research work. And so I really feel proud, and I have very good time, actually. And with, doing my studies at the center, I have a lot of good times with my peers, Dr. Ted Mark, and Dr. Stephen Ward. We still work together, even today, okay? And also I appreciate the time that, I actually taken course with my MIR students, and who have, set up so wonderful parties when the time's ready. So really I can tell is that I have wonderful good times, and also very much thank the, general support from Professor Morley Gunderson, and of course a lot of other professors like, who just passed away, Jeff Rice, and also was my professor as well at the time. And so the time I spent there is just so precious. I still encourage my students, my current students, my future students, to consider doing a PhD at a center. And this is the something that I think I will cherish for my lifetime. Thank you very much.